What is up, ladies and gents? It is Dave, it is Duncan, back from Metal Epidemic with another album review. And for this review, Duncan and I have been checking out the new album from Danish post-hardcore rock band RIVERHEAD. The band's new album, Cancer, will be released on April 28th via Sounds of Subterrania. RIVERHEAD formed in 2015, with the members all having previously played together in various metal and hardcore music projects. In early 2016, RIVERHEAD released their first EP, Letting Go, Something to Die For, and followed it up with their debut album, Nothing, in 2018. They have performed extensively and have earned a reputation as a dynamic and cohesive live band. Following the release of their debut album, RIVERHEAD singer Jonas Pedersen left the band, and the search for a new frontman began. After 4 years of searching and writing, the pandemic hit. In response, the band started writing instrumental tracks and recording demos with producer Jakob Bredel.
We know him.
Jakob Bredel.
I've spoken to him before.
Have we?
Yep.
Yeah. I think I maybe mentioned him on an album at some
Once
point.
or twice.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't think he's ever. I don't actually think he's ever recorded anything.
I thought he was a drummer. Is he a drummer? No.
Right now he's throwing something heavy from the huge shovel hand that he has. Putting it his fucking 16-track like mixing desk, which will be this size. It'll be the size of this fucking fucking headset. Like, that's how big his fucking hands are, like shovels. Don't fuck with him, Dave. Don't make him angry.
I'm only joking. Unexpectedly, Bredal became the new lead singer. However, his entrance was disrupted by his diagnosis of cancer, which brought in an increased focus on the band's music and friendship. The subsequent process of creating the album Cancer became a fellowship, democratic from day one, and a part of the band's joint struggle for survival. The title Cancer serves as both a direct reference to the illness and a metaphor for the opposition and meaninglessness of one inevitably encounters in life. The album also explores the world through the eyes of a child and as a person who, halfway through life, realises that a paradigm shift is necessary for relationships and the world to endure. The struggle is unending, but what matters is to engage in it for life while we still have it and each other. Cancer was produced by Jakob Bredel and RIVERHEAD, recorded by Tommy Hansen, Stu Madsen and Jakob Bredel. And mastered.
Names just drop like bullets right now. What the fuck is going on?
By Brad Botwright. With artwork by Liz Curso. Yeah, that's quite a list. Okay, so we've been following Jakob, and what he does for some time.
Forever, yeah. We've interviewed him. Go back, check that interview on the YouTube site, because we accost him and gush all over him, which sounds seedy, and I don't mean it to sound as seedy as it comes out. Yeah. But for years, we've been fans of him musically, and since kind of transitioning over to behind the desk professionally in his producer capacity, of which I think he is one of the most interesting producers cutting around just now, in that it's very difficult to put your finger on what a Bredel production will sound like, notwithstanding the sentence, it sounds like the band should sound. As we like everything he does sounds just exactly how you think the band would want it to sound, as opposed to how a producer would want it to sound. Yeah,
it's very original. And yeah, we've been a fan of him, and his voice as well, from back in Hatesphere and The Candidate and stuff. Yeah. I'd heard a few RIVERHEAD tracks, like old tracks, a while ago, with their previous vocalist. So I was like really interested to hear how Jakob would sound on this, because stylistically this is pretty different from from Hatesphere and The Candidate. With this being more of a kind of like punk rock or post-hardcore type vibe. So, Duncan, what did you think? What did you make of this new album from RIVERHEAD?
Let's start with the artwork.
Oh, right.
We're going to come to the music, because everyone's like, the music, and I'm like, no, hold it. Hold. Fucking hold. Right? I fucking love the artwork to this. I think it has a kind of, like with us recently covering the band, the St. Pierre Snake Experiment with Galore written down the side, and now we have like Riverhead with a logo down the side. There's something kind of old school, kind of almost 70s Soviet, like kind of 80s propaganda about it that I fucking love. And then the artwork itself has this kind of, once again, has this kind of almost Eastern propaganda feel about it. It's I forget the technique that they call it, but it's essentially, it's like, instead of being like hand painted or drawn, it's actually like using almost like a kind of photorealism and doing stuff with that. It's super cool because looking at this, it weirdly totally works with the sound, but also it's very difficult at first look to place what the band is actually going to sound like. So I fucking love that, right? So I think they've nailed that. Just in itself, it's great. Very much like yourself, I know Jakob's voice inside out. Like I've listened to, I think, anything that he's actually ever been like the front man of a band of, I have, listened to extensively. So I'm very familiar of the remit that man occupies, which is on the heavier thrash scale, right? You're a metal vocalist.
Yeah.
I knew nothing about Riverhead out with the fact that when we spoke to him, he'd said to you, when we're talking maybe off here actually, that he was involved with this project, he did vocals for them, and they were they weren't what we would expect from him. So I was curious, and then of course the tracks kicking, and I heard the stylistic music, and I was like, oh, this is not like jangly guitars. Has a kind of punky feel, kind of hardcore punky feel. What we're doing here, and his vocals came in, and I'll be honest with you, we were about 30 seconds into it, and I was like that. When does Jakob come in? Like, I just assumed like he was doing like someone like the guitarist did vocals or whatever. It is him, but I didn't know he had this in him. And I'll be honest, he's kind of fucking great at this. I mean, like, he's so good. Speaking about his voice, now there's no doubt going to be people that go with that. Well, you speak about him all the time, you know him personally, so you're there may be a slant of bias, if you will, in the review. If you think that, go fuck yourself, right? I'm not going to say anything bad about someone who could visibly kick the shit out of me, but at the same time, I'm not going to blow smoke up his ass as well. If it's not my thing, I'll say it's not my thing. I happen to enjoy this particular genre of music when done well. The problem is it's so easy to fuck up, and Riverhead avoid almost all the cliches, but at the same time release something which is very inherently kind of textbook, works really well. But back to Jakob's voice.
Yeah.
A combination of this kind of... It's a really emotive side I don't think I've ever heard of him before. Sounds wounded, sounds vulnerable, kind of goes in with the story from the blurb. But there's moments where he kind of sounds like a hardcore Marilyn Manson. It's weird, right? There's at least one or two songs where his tonal stuff is so close to like kind of mid 2000s era kind of Marilyn Manson when he was doing these more kind of like kind of grating sort of vocal melodies. Very, very much in line with that. That's a compliment to me. Like, I think it works really, really well. But there's a kind of crooning side to him as well that I think works so well with the music. We reviewed last year, maybe the year before, they're all blurring into one, a band called The Limit, who I was marginally obsessed by for about 6 months. And they kind of played, I mean, it was kind of hardcore-y, punky, throwback rock stuff. Which would double up really, really well with this. But the vocalist had this kind of worn tone.
Yeah.
It's like the miles were evident. Like if he was a tree, you'd already cut him down to count the fucking rings. It was that sort of. And Bredel's got that in spades here. Like it feels authentic. It feels lived. It feels experienced. And you need that for this music. You need this for the subject matter. Because if you're phoning it in, we'll know. He's got great range. He's got really, 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 really great range. And I kind of... Hearing him on this made me realise that we've maybe been deprived of a few years of like prime Breadall vocals. The candidate wrapped up a while ago now, so I know he's been involved with various different things, but he's obviously committed to doing the production, which I'll lean into. I'm going to get to the actual music, but I'm going to lean into the actual the recording on this one. The mixing and the mastering is fucking great, clean, crisp, kind of has that almost that sheen of something like an At the Drive-In, in terms of that. Am I stealing your notes? I'm sorry. Like this is, we've spent too much time together. Clearly, it has that kind of sheen over it, which is good to know that we think alike.
Yeah,
right?
totally on the same lines.
There's a bit of validation there, as opposed to shut the fuck up. It has that kind of like in that everything is completely audible. And when the punch hits you, you feel it. You want to break something when you listen to this, and it's not because it's the heaviest thing you've ever heard. It's just there's so much energy behind it that you just feel like you need to do something. So that's all covered. The names you've mentioned, that should be no surprise. You're throwing a fucking Chu Madsen in there, a Jakob Bredolt, and a fucking "We love you, Brad motherfucking Boatwright." I didn't say at the start, but when you're throwing all that in there, that once again is tried, tested, and true. You're like that side of things is taken care of. So what's the music like? The music is fucking great, right? This has got a journey, a story, if you will, all the way through it. It is such a well-structured album.
Yeah.
And that just when you've got the oomph and the energy, it brings you down. I remember the first time I listened to Grey Britain by The Gallows.
Oh, yeah.
Which I still fucking listen to. I love that album. It's just distilled down. It's like a Molotov cocktail, like that someone's about to light. When I was listening to that, I always the thing that I loved about it the most was that anytime you got like anarchy, the next song would level things back out or take you in a different direction. And that's Cancer on this, this entire album. Whether it's jumping from tracks like Time and Broken Boy into something completely in a different direction like Love Cuts, which is probably the closest you're going to get to like a ballady single from this band, if you know what I mean. Numb to the World, taking things down into a much more subdued, like really, really, really personable track. But then they'll throw kind of bits of jangly quirk in tracks like Survive, huge hooks on songs like The Rusty Sound of Love That Dies. It's just fucking packed. It's just, and it feels like you were saying, once again, don't read the press statement, but you were saying that they've spent 4 years just writing instrumental tracks. It sounds like they've honed that shit down to a fine fucking art. Because there's not one riff here that's played too long. There's not one interlude that feels like it's a step too far. There's not one part of the conventional sound that they actually have, for the most part, that felt... I come back to that word, felt cliche, felt phoned in. It just feels like immaculately written. And you get that from all the instruments. The bass player will take you for a walk. Quite happily go way up the fret while the rest of the band are doing those things. The guitarists get their moments to shine. Drummer is like a stalwart tank. With that drum production as well, it just sounds fucking great. And this is under 30 minutes long. You get to the end of this album, you spin it again. And you spin it again, and you spin it again. And we were at a Cannibal Corpse gig last night. Name dropping. We're at Cannibal Corpse last night, and whilst we were talking about some of the other albums we're going to record in this session, you specifically said to me, a chance to check out Riverhead. I listened to this as soon as I got it. I've been listening to it now for like over a week, but being the stalwart gentleman that I am, cards were held very close to my chest. I was just like, we'll talk about it tomorrow, because I did feel that if we'd started speaking about it, we'd have nothing to talk about here that would feel even remotely like a surprise, so we put a pin in it. Denmark, man, there's the scene is fucking incredible, and every genre that the bands appear to touch on at the moment are just so much in my wheelhouse of what I like, and like they just connect to me in a way. They're almost like Velcro. Like every like they just stick to me and I can't peel them off. I think this is awesome. I'll be honest. I think it's absolutely awesome. I think I hope these guys get some success from this, because this could shift units. You know what I mean? And it has that quality where I could see them playing with fucking umpteen bands. I want to see it live. I really want to see it live. I think it's great. I think you should talk. Because otherwise, like, it's going to be very difficult for me to finish the review with the album's cock in my mouth. So I think it's like, once again, I don't know how many times I have to say, I genuinely feel spoiled this year. It's fucking April, and I'm just like, I'm up to my man tits and fucking great albums. So.
Yeah.
How did you enjoy Riverhead, Dave?
Well,
at the drive-in.
I spent the most time with this album out of all the albums we're reviewing this week, because I wanted to make sure that my feelings on it were legit, because I knew I was going to get initial excitement, right? I knew as soon as I was going to listen, it was like, Jakob's involved, he's producing it, Tube Madsen. I knew there was going to be excitement.
Tube, Boatwright's involved.
Boatwright's
when's Boatwright not involved?
So I thought, right, I'm going to be excited to hear this. So I wanted to just make sure, take my time with it, spend a lot of time with the album, and make sure like I was truly happy with what I thought about the album, and I wasn't just like driving the love train for Jakob because we are kind of obsessed with everything he does.
But and you came to that conclusion that after the glasses, the rose-tinted fanboy glasses, the Bredel shades were taken off, Dave.
But honestly,
removed the Boatwright contact lenses.
Without the rose-tinted sunglasses and my love for Jakob.
the Madsen mangina came off. At that point realised,
this album's fucking unbelievable.
Yes.
This album, fucking hell. From the tracks that I'd heard from the band's previous album, Nothing, and the tracks on Cancer, there's a clear evolvement in this band's playing, songwriting, and delivery. There is a huge leap forward, in my opinion. Nothing, which was their previous album, was a good post-hardcore album. Not massively memorable, but still good energy, great production. Cancer, on the other hand, is full of standout moments. Like, there are so many memorable moments on this album that will get stuck in your head afterwards. And that's down to various things. Firstly, as I said, the songwriting is much more refined, it's more varied, it's more dynamic. They've captured more sides to their sound on this one. It's got the post-hardcore, but there's also moments where they lean more into kind of like more punk rock, or just strip it back to something raw and full of emotion. So that it gives you an album that keeps you far more engaged, because you're getting something different all through the album, while it all still feels tonally connected as well. It also feels, to me anyway, like a more direct album. There's less fat on this album. It gets to the point quicker than the previous album, which I feel like when I listened to Nothing, I felt like they'd overthought some of that. Like, they maybe just crammed too much into it. I feel like this album just flows so much better.
Was that their debut, did you say?
Yeah.
Maybe that's... We've spoken about this before. Sometimes I think when bands release a debut, they give you everything in the kitchen sink. You know, because they're desperately... You know, they've arrived, and all those ideas have to come out because there might not be another album.
Absolutely. On here, nothing feels overworked. I feel like this album feels more instinctual. Like, they've went with their gut on a lot of it. Even if it's a simple idea, they've just let the simplicity kind of work its magic. Because sometimes, you know, like, less gives you so much more. And I think this album gives you more of everything without being too complicated. It's also got something that wasn't quite as kind of potent on the last album, and that's emotion. Like, this album has so much feeling to it, and that obviously has to do...
Goddamn piano, Dave.
Goddamn pianos.
Goddamn piano. Like, they peeled out a goddamn piano for this release.
A lot of that's to do with the themes, obviously, of life and death and survival on the album, but it's also represented in the tone of the music, and even more notably in the vocals. I mean, Jakob he sounds incredible, incredible on this album, and I'm not just saying that because, like, we've met him and we've spoken to him and we're like We know like what he's done in the past. He sounds fantastic on this, and it's so different to what I'm used to hearing him.
Couldn't be any more different. If it's like you play anything from Hatesphere, you play anything from The Candidate, you play like any snippet from this against it and say that's the same vocalist.
I know.
And it kind of breaks your brain.
Yeah, like...
You know what I mean?
And the crazy thing is that this vocal style that he's embraced on this album suits him down to the ground.
God.
He's got the kind of hardcore punk tone. He's got that nailed. It's got venom in it. It's got a ton of character. There's moments where he reaches that point in his voice where it starts to just rasp ever so slightly. And it's those moments are a thing of beauty. Like, he doesn't overdo it. It's very controlled. He'll only push it when the track really needs it. But when he touches on it, it's glorious. He's also got this fucking unbelievably honest, kind of clean tone on this release that takes it to that next level. It's catchy. It's lyrically reflective. It's very memorable. And then he's got this other level which he goes to on tracks like Numb to the World or 0806. And I was just like stunned by it. Like, it's so genuine. It's emotionally charged. You kind of believe every word of it. You know, it's his delivery and the kind of sincerity is just authentic. And for me, those moments took this album to that next level.
Yeah.
There are lyrics on here that were just like living in my head rent free afterwards. There's so many lines from this album. The things like "Tonight's the night that we are going to die" from Numb the World. That was just like just very haunting, and I was singing it like afterwards, straight away after hearing the album. 0806 I need to talk about because I think it's a huge huge moment and highlight on this album. It's
also smartly placed. It's very smartly placed.
It's the band's kind of first attempt at an acoustic song, which was originally written as an up-tempo, like full band song, but it never made the final cut of the album. And then one night they were messing around with acoustic guitars and the track just kind of started to unfold into something different, and Jakob started to add his part in, and then they decided like we need to use this, and it became like one of the most important tracks on the album in a kind of like processing the experience of what Jakob went through type way. But also because of how raw and stripped back and kind of vulnerable it is. It is just acoustic guitar and Jakob's vocal, but it will just grab you harder than you'd expect because it's so stripped back. There's nowhere to hide on it. You can't help but hang on every word he says. That part of the song, the needles, tubes, and fear, life or death, stripped down, tied to machines, dried out, living in a trench, sleep awaits, total surrender. I was just like, I was reading the lyric sheet, I was just like, oh my fucking god, this is like really hard hitting, really honest, and even for someone who hasn't gone through like that diagnosis or experience, it gives you some insight into what he was dealing with at that time.
It's the difference between, and we talk about this is what I talk, certain bands you can do I'm writing an album about this, because I went down the rabbit hole on Wikipedia one night, and now, I've got enough information to write an album, and that's fine, and it works in certain genres.
Yeah.
There's other genres that it's very, very evident if what you're singing about is something that you've not experienced.
Yeah.
And this genre is that, and it doesn't get any more like if you you can't shove an acoustic guitar and a vocalist and bare your soul unless what you're bearing is something that's real.
100%. So yeah, on a vocal point, it's flawless, absolutely stunning. I also want to shout out a couple other people on the band though. Bassist Mixon Lindberg, he's a fucking demon on the bass. This guy, man, I loved his style on this. You can tell from listening he's a finger player, right? He's not a pick guy, he's a finger guy, because the bass work is so smooth. He's gliding up and down that fretboard.
Weird. I did not know he was in the band. Again, just an insight to it. Mixon was in Hatesphere when I've met Mixon before.
Oh, really?
He was playing bass in Hatesphere.
Oh, right. Okay.
He's fucking great though.
Interesting.
Yeah.
He's phenomenal. He knows when to sit in the pocket and just let it kind of groove, but then when there's an opportunity to add a little bit of flair, he does, and it sounds awesome. He kind of reminds me of Carol Alvarez from The Descendants. The way that he just kind of moves in his own lane at times, very, very similar.
By feel. It's all
absolutely.
By feel. Yeah.
100%. The drums as well. I think drums might be overlooked on this album because there are so many other standout elements to it. But the guy called Mads on the drums, he's a beast, absolute beast. I loved he's got a very natural kind of groove to his playing. Like the feeling on track Torches is like super tight, but it's got a really cool kind of pulse to it. And it's alongside that wake up kind of chant that's going on as well. Fantastic. But you can also flip the switch and just throw in something a bit more kind of offbeat in that kind of at the drive-in type way.
Yeah.
Or, little subtle things, like little accents on the ride cymbal as well. I thought that was fantastic. Production-wise, like, with the names involved, like, is it any surprise this sounds fucking outstanding, really? I mean, like, it's got everything. It's got real kind of punk rock character to it. It's very earthy. They haven't overproduced it. It's not like overly shiny. It's very natural sounding. The mix is beautifully balanced with enough breathing room for all the instruments. The bass is just like sitting in its own little place, giving its own flavour, and the vocals are perfectly captured.
Yeah.
Even I love the way that even they've captured the kind of the breaths that he takes as well. Like in between moments, you can hear him breathing. I thought that just adds more personality to the whole album.
Like a more neurotic producer would remove those.
Exactly, yeah. Every time I listen to this, I become more infatuated with it. I think it's an album that will hit you with a kind of instant feeling of enjoyment, but on subsequent listens, you will start to kind of dissect more on the album. I kind of like the at the driving thing. It's got a very classic feel to it.
Yeah.
Like when I'm listening to it, like if someone said to me, this album came out 20 years ago, I'd be like, all right, cool. I wouldn't have questioned it. Like I wouldn't question it at all. But
there's a ton of people that don't, like, their first introduction to post-hardcore was at the drive-in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And this kind of feels like if you told me this album came out at the same time, I couldn't argue with you. Like,
true. Yeah.
It's the biggest compliment I can give it. You know what I mean? It's like the attention to detail across the board is fucking immaculate.
It's weird. It sounds like it could have been released 20 years ago, but it doesn't sound outdated either.
Doesn't sound old,
it's almost timeless. It's got a kind of timeless feel to it. I love this. I think it's outstanding front to back. Like, just fantastic. Scores for Riverhead and Cancer. What are you thinking for this one?
Because I've not given enough out this year, let me hit you with 5, Dave. Every week now. Every week. Where's Duncan's 5 going? Aye.
Yeah.
There's not a moment. I've listened to this a lot. There's not a moment I would change for all the fucking money in my bank account. I think it's a perfect album.
Yeah.
If Riverhead never do anything near as good as this afterwards, they've written a fucking incredible album.
Yeah.
And yes, the next logistical issue that me and you have to solve is how we see them live. That may involve us
Denmark
going to Denmark, right? I'm being serious here. That may involve us actually physically going to Denmark, but it's great. It's so. I almost feel like I'm talking about it. Still, this is an experience album.
Yep.
You need to experience the album.
100%. This is phenomenal. Like, this is an album that I get a real feeling about. Like when I'm listening to it, I just get that kind of special feeling when I've got it on. Like I've said, like I'm listening to some kind of like future classic album. I think it's perfectly executed in every area. So I will join you on that 5-star.
Sold out so hard, Dave. With 5s this year, huh? Just giving them out everywhere.
Riverhead, Cancer, ladies and gents. Check this album out. If it's the last thing you do, listen to this album. It's out on April 28th. I'll put some links below to the Facebook, to their Bandcamp. Have a listen to some of the singles. Let us know what you think. Stick some comments in. say thank you for letting us, for us telling you about the album, obviously, because that's what we're here for. That is the review. Thank you for checking it out. And,
aren't you glad we didn't do Metallica now? Aren't you? You can see it in your face. Yeah. We did Riverhead instead.
Yeah. That's the review. Thank you for checking it out. We'll be back with another review very soon, but until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Bye, everyone.